Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new show. First episode of The Breakout. My name's Marc Chase, co-founder of MeetBee, and this is going to be an opportunity to talk about all things virtual. It is going to be an exciting day. Our very first interview on The Breakout is someone who's rather special to us here at MeetBee, one of our advisors of MeetBee, which we have known for some years. He is known as the presence champion. He facilitates all across the world, both virtually and in person, and frankly, an all-around good guy. Let us introduce to you Richard Richards. Richard, how's it going?
Good morning, Marc, and thank you. That's quite an introduction, I tell you. I'm blushing here. If I had more hair, I'd be blushing to the roots of my hair. So yeah, but no, thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm well. Thank you, Marc.
Oh, well, I appreciate that so much. And we wanted to have this chat with you because you have been someone who's been a real pillar in our lives in developing some best practices and how we communicate virtually. And you've had many a story and a lot of experiences around how we go about handling virtual meetings and communicating, but also having different locations where you've had to have virtual meetings. So we want to hear from you. Where have you had your strangest virtual meeting?
Well, I think I've had my fair share of meetings in cars and airport lounges and coffee shops, and those don't really count for anything. But I think perhaps some of the strangest one was once when I was working in Croatia. And I remember I had a really important meeting and facilitation to do. And I remember calling up the hotel ahead of time. And I went through their brochure looking for the perfect room where I could set up my virtual studio so that I didn't have one of those dreadful beds behind me, but actually had something that looked semi-professional. And I remember going backwards and forwards with endless emails to the hotel saying, I know you've got this room. You've got this room with the desk in exactly the right place. That's the room I want. They didn't quite get it. They had no idea why I wanted a special desk in a special location. But eventually I got what I wanted, and it worked out really well. But you know, the challenge, of course, in hotels is they have these ridiculously tiny desks. And by the time you set up your laptop and set up a camera and you've got all your other paraphernalia then, it's just a complete nightmare. So that's one that comes to mind. I think another one that comes to mind, was in Portugal once. I'd taken over the hotel's main bar in the lobby because nobody was there at 10 o'clock in the morning. I'm having a meeting there, sitting at this bar, surrounded by bottles of booze and beer taps and dirty glasses from the night before. And I'm trying to hold this professional meeting. So I'm looking for just the right angle when I'm not seeing yesterday's dirty glasses.
Wow, what a story. I tend to think because we have seen you in virtual meetings in those types of locations, and very often we're distracted ourselves because we're thinking whether it's the plane going by or the footsteps of people walking behind us could be affecting people in that meeting. The technology is really good these days with noise cancellation. How do you handle trying to make that distraction be ignored in your mind, knowing that it's not affecting people in that call?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. Number one is I think I try to meditate every morning. So I'm used already sort of trying to not let distractions come. And if they're there, I acknowledge them, but let them go. They didn't hold me hijack right. I think otherwise, though, sometimes, Marc, it's interesting. I'm actually a great believer that if there's a distraction in the background, let it be and introduce it into the meeting. I find that the best meetings sometimes and I do a lot of work with a pharmaceutical company in North America. And of course, as a pharmaceutical company that specializes in pet pharmaceuticals, everybody I meet with has a pet somewhere in the house at that time, a dog or a cat. So the moment a cat sort of wanders across the screen, it's like, oh, guys, listen, I want to know the name. What's the name of the cat? Is he going to join us? Is she going to be there? So it's this idea about introducing these distractions as part of the experience and letting that also be just a moment just to break the tension, to break the monotony, if you like, and just create some animation.
It makes me think about a situation that happened some years ago. We all have seen this. It was an analyst based out of South Korea. He was on a television program. And for those of you who haven't watched it, he was on camera, he was talking. And at one moment, when you look kind of behind him, there was a door that was opening up. And it looked like one of his very young children going into shot. And in itself, it didn't look too bad. But it was the reaction that he gave to it, especially when he realized that not only was his child there, but also what seemed to be his wife leopard crawling into the office to try and collect her child in the roller unit that the child was using. I think that in itself made it seem awkward. Richard, what do you think that particular individual should have done in hindsight?
Oh gosh, I mean, it's obvious, I think, what he should have done. The poor chap probably didn't think this at the time. He was more concerned about looking professional, right? What he should have done is to embrace his child, take a moment to introduce him to the audience as the next generation coming up, and then somehow incorporate him and then gently put him back. That would have demonstrated, first of all, a real love and respect for the child and for his wife, right? Secondarily, it would have allowed us to actually recognize he was a human being calling from the less than ideal situations. And thirdly, it's this idea that he's not ashamed. You know, he has a child who has a name. Give the child a name and introduce us to him. Allow us into your world. And I think it would have increased our trust in him as a presenter 1,000,000-fold.
You talk about trust, Richard, and when you think about the time that you take when you're in different locations trying to find the ideal virtual location, what is your intention leading into that meeting? Why is that particular space, whether it is a particular background in a bar or a specific closed office space at an airport, why is that actually so important versus just going to that virtual meeting and seeing how it goes?
I think one of the things, Marc, is that we forget is that where we are and how we set ourselves up communicates a whole bunch about how important the other person is. Now, clearly we have emergency situations when you need to take a call and you can't be in the ideal location. But if you do have a choice, the efforts you make to create a super space for that meeting indicates the other person their level of importance. It's the same thing I do when I'm working in the classroom. Right? In the classroom, my training rooms are sacred spaces. They're sacred spaces which I create with a sense of organization, a sense of care, a sense of comfort, just to create a psychologically safe space for people to open up and be transparent and be authentic. What's the equivalent in the virtual world? It's making sure I'm being thoughtful about the setup, where I'm going to be doing the call. What I want to do is I want to communicate to the other person that they are the only thing that matters, and I've done everything I can to manage that ability to stay focused, and that requires some preparation.
Great final words in the future and the vision of what you're seeing, Richard, and how we're going to be interacting moving forward. I'd like to thank you so much for joining us here in our inaugural episode of The Breakout. If you want to find out more about Richard and his coaching practice, go ahead to his website, richardrichards.com. From myself, we'll see you next time. Take care. Be intentional.